Hey guys, Brett King here. I'm actually in Dubai this week for the um, World Government Summit, which is a pretty cool event to attend. But you may have heard me talking about some of the work I've been doing on a new book. In fact, I've got a new book, Branch Tomorrow, coming out very shortly. So you'll hear about that over the next couple of months. It's certainly going to be out by this summer. But I'm actually been working on another really interesting project, which is a book. Hopefully, will come out next year, which is entitled "The Rise of the Challengers." And I thought it was important to document what's been happening over the last decade or so with this sort of material change in the way people are doing their day-to-day banking, whether that's through mobile wallets or neobanks. And of course, now some of the largest banks in the world are digital players, the likes of NeoBank, Revolut, WeBank in China, and so forth. And I thought it was time for us to document these various players who have been instrumental in building this sort of new category of digital bank, and where that has reshaped the way people's expectations of digital banking in general. And obviously, the wallet movement is part of that as well. So this week we're going to start this series, and it's the first of many interviews that are already in the can. It's a CEO series of founders of leading digital banks in their market, and essentially their foundation story. Some of the challenges they had, the regulatory approach they took in each market. I think you'll find this, if you're interested in sort of this pioneering history of this neobank or challenger bank movement, then I think you're going to find this series really interesting, as I have. Sort of really reflecting historically on my time at Movement and stuff like that in these interviews as well. So I hope you don't mind that indulgence. But check it out. This week we have the CEO, Abby, from bunq, and they're based, of course, in the Netherlands. And I think you'll find their story very interesting. Let's listen to the interview. Welcome back to Breaking Banks. I am the host, and of course, Breaking Banks is the #1 fintech podcast. So great for you guys to be joining us today. We're going to continue our series of speaking to founders about their founder journey, particularly in the challenger bank in NeoBank space. And today we have a serial entrepreneur, Ali Niknam, who is in 2012 founded bunq. Launched the app in 2015, and they call themselves the Bank of the Free. So, Ali, welcome to Breaking Banks.
Thank you, Brett, for having me. I look very much forward to this conversation. You're always so well informed, so I think we'll have a lovely chat.
Nice of you to say so. Thank you. I try to be. And of course, we could get into talking about, the news of the moment around DeepSeek. Maybe we'll get into AI a bit later, but, because it is an interesting conversation. But let's start with, before we start talking about the idea, where the idea for the bank came from and so forth, give us a bit more about your background. What did you do before bunq? It says serial entrepreneur. What were you entrepreneuring?
I'll give you my 30-second intro. Maybe that's
Sure.
That's cool. So I was born in Canada. Iranian parents, left Canada when I was 2. Lived in Canada, then Iran. Then we came to the Netherlands. Brought up in the city of Gouda or Gouda, the cheese. That's actually a city in the Netherlands. So that's kind of funny. Not many people realize that.
Interesting.
I started coding at the age of 9. I started investing in stocks at the age of 12. And I had my very first company at the age of 16. My first big company I founded at the age of 21. That company is today called Team Blue, and it's the world's 3rd largest domain name and web hosting provider, after GoDaddy from the US and 1&1 in Europe. While running that company, we correctly predicted there will be a shortage of data center space. And so I co-founded what turned out to be the largest privately owned data center in the Netherlands. Then I took a step back and figured out, it would be a great time to contemplate what to do with my life. And I wrote a book that I'm incredibly proud of.
Always
Made a
good to
rookie
write
mistake.
books.
Yeah, made a rookie mistake, wrote it in Dutch. But other than that, that was cool. And then I figured out that what really drives me, what really defines me, what really, I think describes me as a human being is basically two things. On the one hand, creating products that people love to use, and on the other hand, in doing so, trying to help the world forward a little bit. And given that the financial crisis was kind of at its peak at the time, I figured, hey, you know what? Starting a bank sounds really challenging, very difficult. I don't think I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. Nobody thought we could do it.
It's hard, it's like
So
getting a
let's do it.
spaceship to orbit, starting a bank,
Yeah. No, but it really is. And the fascinating thing is, in the case of a spaceship, it's actually hard because of what I would like to call real hardness, like the limitations of physics, the limitations of this planet, the limitations of material is what are holding you back. And in the case of banking, none of that is true, right? Because if you look at what banking actually is, the hard part is self-imposed difficulties, like the regulators and all the rules and all the regulations and all
and
the
the
laws
complex
and all the other
products.
things. And the complex products. Yeah. Well, I'm sure you have spoken to a regulator or two in your time.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm actually, I'm officially advising regulators now. I've got to that point in my career, so I don't know what that quite means, but it's, I guess I've been telling them, I've been speaking to regulators for years, but I have the advantage of, as you do, of having interacted with regulators as an innovator, which actually isn't so bad if you have the right posture with the regulator. If you go to the regulator and say, we'd really love to do this, the regs don't allow us to do it right now, but obviously you're going to be doing this at some point in the future. Can we have a conversation about a safe transition to that future where you can experiment with us? I thought that approach worked pretty well. And just, the other one that's very effective normally is bringing in examples from other markets that are already doing it, right? When you started to get the idea to do bunq, obviously the regulatory stuff would have been there to some extent, but you wouldn't have had any idea how difficult or how tortured the regulations are for banking. But what was the real driver, apart from helping people? Why did you think you could do banking differently?
Well, I think, quite honestly, I didn't understand at the time the way banks operated, and I felt like everything would be digital, which is kind of a moot point, I guess. Today, you're like, of course, everything would be digital, but
but not back in those days. Not in like 2015, 2012 timeframe.
Or even earlier, right? Because we started in 2012. So
So Movin. I was there in 2010 with Movin, and we were trying to get by a bank by 2012. And this was in the US, where even we had to get like regulatory approval to launch our app because we didn't have a wet signature. We were the first app that allowed you to do a debit card without a wet signature. And I remember just having the conversation when I was like, well, they've done it in these other markets, and we're going to have to do it at some point because the traction that mobile's getting and so forth. And they knew that, and they're like, yeah, we know we're going to have to do it at some point. But so I said, well, we can give you a safe option. We'll do 5,000 customers. We'll see how it goes. And but it was one of those processes of I still to this day don't think incumbent banks realize they can negotiate with regulators as long as it is safely innovating the market, right?
I'm pretty sure they do, though.
Yeah.
At least in Europe, they do.
Yeah. Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So, I think for us, it was really important. And again, this was amidst the financial crisis that had a deep impact on society. So a couple of things came together. One of it was that we felt that the future would be very digital, which allowed us to be very user-centric, which is close to my heart and close to everybody that is now working at bunq's heart. Because tech allows you to customize a user experience towards what they are expecting. Secondly, we felt that the impact would be far larger than just innovating banking, because an unstable financial sector means an unstable society. And thirdly, we felt that it was almost like a duty. Like if we don't do it, who will? Because we looked around us, and as Albert Einstein says, you can't get out of a problem with the same mindset that got you into the problem. Yeah. And unfortunately, at the time, at least, what we observed was a lot of the same mindset, and so we felt almost like a duty to start this journey, which also resulted in us having a quite different path to nearly all, if not all, of our competitors that started a couple of years later, because of my fortunate position and background in the other startups and companies that I had founded. Rather than rushing to market with a MVP and then, basically setting a card product in the market and then scaling up towards a bank, for us, also given our ideology, it was most important to get that banking license.
Right.
And so when we started in end of November 2012, our goal was to actually get that banking license, and in doing so, opening the door for many others that would follow. And it took us 2.5 to 3 years, and we became the first in 35 years to get a greenfield banking permit. And of course, as you know, in those 35 years, the complexity had only increased with all kinds of additional regulations and rules and et cetera. So for us to pull that off, that was quite something.
Yeah, I mean, Fedor got their banking license in 2012, if I remember correctly, as well. So it was a pretty interesting time. There wasn't a lot of activity. You had NeoBank in Australia in 2008, but they were a spin-off from NAB, so they were under NAB's license. You had ING Direct, obviously, prior to that in Amsterdam, but they were a web-based thing, not really mobile-focused, and there wasn't a lot of innovation, that sort of took us outside of the branch until the mobile came along. Then you had, Simple ourselves, Green Dot in the States coming along in around the same time. And then you had an explosion of neobanks, 2013, 2014, and so forth. So I know from personal experience, even in 2012 and 2013, we had 250,000 customers for Movin', and we couldn't raise any funding as a neo. And then 2014, you got Monzo and Starling and Revolut all kick off in 2014. NeoBank 2015, and now NeoBank is the largest challenger in the world. So, it was an interesting time, but the hurdles were not insignificant. So how did you get through that initial period, over those first few years where funding started to free up?
Well, I think that's a great point. So I don't know the history of Fedor, but it may have been that they already had different licenses, or that they were working.
They were in Germany, and I think it was a very early digital license. They might have started with EMI. Right, I don't know, but I'd have to ask Matthias.
Yeah, probably in EMI, because anyway, to the best of my knowledge, we were the first in 35 years, and actually sandboxing and all those ideas were tested with us first and then deployed in the rest of Europe together with the Dutch regulators. So that was quite something. And then, for us, because we have had such a different ideology, such a different focus, we never paid attention to many of our competitors. We first focused on, getting that license, because we knew that would open up the door to others, which it subsequently did, because many of those who started with either EMI license or PSP license or one of the lighter licenses, subsequently moved up to a full banking license, Monzo and Revolut being two of those examples. And then once we had that license, because we had the freedom to create products that we felt our users actually needed, we started focusing on our product, which allowed us to come with so many innovations that nobody else had thought of at that moment, or at least nobody had launched yet. Like biometric security, and all the stuff that is normal today. But being the first is
Yeah, it was all
always a bit
greenfield,
difficult.
right? Like even we had
exactly.
I remember we had a facility in the app where you could turn the card on and off. Right. So
Exactly.
2013, if you misplaced your card, you could turn it off, right?
Yeah.
And there's still banks today that don't have that in their app.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I mean, even today, and I don't want to name any names, but even today, some of the largest Dutch banks don't have push notifications for your payments, and and it's almost
that's
inconceivable
crazy.
how big the gap is between what we offer as a neobank and these old dinosaurs. And I think because we have had that focus on our users and then subsequently translating that into something they love to use, over time, we have steadily grown into being trusted as a bank, because I think that's also what makes bunq unique, that people actually trust us as their main bank. Contrary to some of the other neobanks that have perfectly valid use cases, many people actually rely on us and use us as their day-to-day bank. Many businesses do so. Many expats do so. Many entrepreneurs do so. Many people just do so. And I think that is the result of our focus on being user-centric, building something they love to use, and in doing so, gaining their trust that we're here to stay and that we're a serious partner.
That's cool. Well, when was your first funding round then, your seed round?
That's a great question, and I feel like I should probably know, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, time kind of flies. I think 3 years ago, it ended up being the largest A round in fintech history. So I think we got like $193 million or something at a valuation of nearly $2 billion. And it's been the only funding round we have done because bunq has been bootstrapped, which is, I guess, also kind of unique. Not many banks are bootstrapped, to the best of my knowledge.
No, fair enough. So, that's. I mean, you've done well with the funding. The Series A was a big one, no doubt. But that sort of solved a lot of problems, but it also probably created new ones. So let's talk about the difficulties during the process. What were the times that you had during the process of foundation of the team and going to market and so forth that were really, the trickiest things you had to push through? I know you self-funded this, you had your other enterprises that you'd exited from and so forth as well to some extent, but were there any points in the process here where you were like, this is really testing my patience, I don't know if this is the right path? Most of us have had those moments, right?
Oh man, are you kidding? I think every day, and I'm not even exaggerating, every day I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What am I doing in my life? And it's just hard. I mean, starting a new company by itself is hard, as you know. Doing so in a regulated environment is
harder. Yeah.
super hard. Doing so in a regulated environment in a small country where you have these big incumbents that will do anything to stay ahead is near impossible. And then it was just hard, and it was hard on so many levels because we were trying to do new things. Obviously, the regulator is very careful about allowing new things, but then we needed those new things to be able to differentiate from the old guys. But then we ended up spending a lot of time and energy on getting those new things through the regulator, and so that was a disproportionate impact, on our P&L. And then as soon as we got approval, then the big guys kind of made use of that. So it was and actually still is a very, very strange dynamic. And I think the reason why we made it, because we're profitable now for 2 years and the future looks very, very good for bunq, I believe, is really three things. One, our laser focus on our users. We just knew what they felt, what was important for them. And in doing so, we also had the joy, when we excited someone or when we pleased someone and we saw their response. That was just such a joy. Second, the team. At the time, I mean, a lot of young people. I know in the banking sector, usually, especially when you talk to regulators, they're like, hey, we want gray hairs, we want 30 years of experience. But again, as Einstein said, you cannot solve issues with the same mindset that creates them. And so you actually need new people with a fresh look and creativity and to get to that innovation. And it was, and still to this day, is such a joy to walk around bunq and see all these people coming up with creative ideas and, I didn't think of that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah,
and that just
that's great when you got a team that can do that, that can push you. But
And
it's
the
still the essence of what you wanted to create, but they can sharpen the vision of it, collectively.
They can, and it's and it was just nice to see that despite the hard environment, these young people were just determined. They were determined. They had, they came up with something. They tested it with our users. They knew our users wanted it, and they just wouldn't give up. And I think that's the third thing. And that was just, I'm so proud of these people. It's like we would have never been where we are today without them.
Yeah. So I do have a question about the name and how you came up with the name, because I would have thought Debunked would have been the name, right? But how did you come up with bunq as a name? I mean, apart from the obvious that it sounds like bank, but tell us about the
so that's
ideation.
a great question, because a lot of people think it has something to do with debunking, or there's a deeper meaning, or it sounds similar. But actually, the way it went down is we tried to come up with a name. And then the first inclination was to come up with a name that's smart, that kind of reflects who we are, what we aspire to be to our users. And, you end up with, quite frankly, a bunch of shitty names. So then we didn't do that. And then the second is you come up with names that sound cool, something like, whatever name you want to use, like something that sounds
like moving.
Like moving.
Move and bank, right? That was how I came up with it anyway.
And then we were really going through it. And then, I just suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. Literally, this is a true story. I woke up in the middle of the night and I had this image in my head that money moves from hand to hand. And so what I wanted was a name that visually represented two hands and us being on the same side.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I thought, and it was like, it honestly was 4 a.m. and I checked the domain name, and in the Netherlands it was available and the .com wasn't, and we ended up buying it because the first logo of bunq was the B and the U, and the U and the N were actually visually two hands holding each other. Like, we're in this together, and you see what I see, and we're on the same page. That's what bunq was about. Then we simplified the logo a little bit because the readability wasn't sufficient.
Right.
That's how we got.
That's cool. That's a good story, man. I like that. I like it's got a bit of, personal, creation to it. I remember I was doing the roadshow for Bank 2.0 for my book. And some of the listeners have probably heard this before, but I was doing this roadshow on my book, Bank 2.0, and I was at this networking breakfast in Santa Monica, run by a friend of mine, Ken Ratowski. We've been friends since then. And I was talking about the bank account of the future. This was August 2010. And I was talking about, Well, don't be silly. You're not going to go to a branch to get a bank account. You're just going to download it to your phone, and you're going to use your phone to pay for stuff. And your phone is going to be smart enough to coach you on how to use your money safer and so forth. I was talking about AI-based, personalized banking. That was the vision. And one of the big VC guys there, William Quigley from Clearstone Ventures at the time, William said, yeah, but who's going to do this? Banks aren't going to do it. And I was like, well, I'm going to do it. So that afternoon I went home, August the 8th, 2010, and I registered the domain Move and Bank, and Move and Bank contracted, right? So it was sort of similar moment, right? Whereas like, I know what I got to do. It's like,
it just clicks.
Yeah. I get it. All right. So, in the interests of time, I want to stay on track. Let's talk a little bit about the core technology differentiation of bunq and how you separated or distanced yourself from the traditional players. And more significantly, right now today, as we're recording this, there's a lot of hullabaloo about DeepSeek and AI in general. And, so where do you think AI is going to take bunq over the next few years as well?
Okay, that's a great question because, as I said in my intro, I've been coding since I was 9. I consider myself to be more of a techie, like an old school techie, back when it wasn't cool with the big glasses and the whole thing.
Yeah, amen.
So tech has always been a fundamental part of bunq. I've been co-developing the backend code myself. I still review code on a daily basis. And when we started bunq, we knew that we needed to have a code base that would be sustainable for a very, very long time. On the one hand, and on the other hand, even back then, we knew that AI, which was called kind of machine learning back then, would be so profound. And so when we created bunq, we already took into consideration in the data structures, in the code base, to be ready for this future. And we have been using AI for a long time, for example, for transaction monitoring to keep your money safe and secure. And now, fast forward to today, we are using AI in so many different areas. We're using AI to help our users budget. So, like, you can literally ask your bunq app, like, hey, how come I spend more this month than last? It'll analyze your thing and give you an answer in real time. You can ask it for tips on how to save money. It categorizes your payments automatically. So AI is I think there's a lot of buzz around AI, and like as with any new technology that moves so fast, probably 90% of the investments are going to go down the drain. But that's not the point. The point is that those 10% are going to return 1,000-fold.
Right.
And I'm very excited about the future.
Yeah.
Well, and you get to, by the way, experience something very special because you can actually see the sun in my face. And I think that's the first time this year in Amsterdam. So I'm happy to share this moment with you.
That's good news. See, we bought the sun.
It exists. It exists in Amsterdam too,
good.
the sun.
That's good.
Yeah, it's always cloudy.
So tell me about your favorite moment at bunq over the last few years, and what, like if you're telling the story of bunq to your grandkids one day, what are you going to tell them about bunq?
Oh man, there are so many great stories. Like when we launched, we didn't know what was going to happen, and we got so much attention, and we had so many users in a limited amount of time, and obviously we were a small team, so then people just volunteered to stay at the office. People fell asleep on the couch, and just to make sure that our users were taken care of. I think one of the moments that I really enjoyed was I was standing in line at this very small festival to just buy a drink, and then the person in front of me had a bunq card, and then
I love that, man.
It's like you see your creation in action. And check this out, because this was the early days. They started talking about bunq. It was like, oh, that's a cool card. And he said, yeah, it's this new bank.
Yeah,
I really
and they're
like
selling
it.
it back to you.
Yeah.
And then did you tell them you were the CEO?
Yes. Say what?
Did you tell them you were the founder?
No, they weren't speaking to me. It was the person in front of me.
Okay, that's
so
cool.
I was just observing
You were just
this and
the
seeing
fly on
this
the
happen,
wall.
and it was magical.
Cool.
It was so magical. So yeah.
No, I love that those sort of stories. I remember we did real-time receipts with categorization. We had that in December 2012, right?
Oh,
so,
wow.
And I remember the first time we had a customer contact us, and at this stage, through social media, people could just call me up as the CEO. My telephone was everywhere. And I remember getting a call from a customer, and she said, "You just saved me because I didn't realize I'd lost my card." And the real-time notification for the receipt was what triggered me to find out that, oh, my card's gone. It's been stolen and someone's using it. And I was able to turn off the card in the app. And that was when I realized how amazing real-time messaging or notifications were for stopping simple fraud,
Yeah, definitely.
So as an example, but yeah.
Yeah,
anyway,
cool.
Listen, Ali, it's been great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
What have you got
me.
planned for bunq for this year in 2025? Is there any
so
major news we're going to expect to hear?
Stuff. Well, I can promise
you don't have an IPO up your sleeve, do you? By any chance?
No. I can promise you it won't be an IPO this year.
Okay.
But we have a lot of amazing stuff coming. A lot of stuff that I can promise you will surprise you and will delight you. But as is our way at bunq, we will never spoil the surprise until we're ready to launch. So you'll have to be a little bit patient.
All right. Well, no exclusives for the Breaking Banks team this time, but Ali, thanks for joining us, and really exciting to see what you're doing with bunq out of Amsterdam, the bank of the free, and we hope you stay free, or at least affordable.